This is Dave Pannell. I'm here with Derek Mergele Rust. He's an attorney in Dallas, Texas. And you own your own firm, correct?
Yeah, so I'm a founding partner at DebnamRust. There are three of us that were founding partners, and we have grown, and we're now a law firm of about 14 people.
Okay. Wow. And it looks like you got started, I guess you got licensed and everything in 2017. So you've grown quite a bit in that time.
Yeah, and actually most of our growth has really been over the past couple of years post-COVID. And we're actually based in downtown Dallas and do a lot of work in family law, probate law, and estate planning. So the way I like to explain it to people is, there's two groups of cases. There's those that don't have a will, and there's those that do have a will. And in each one of those groups, there's three paths. There's the easy, the normal, and the hard. And so in our consultations, we like to kind of figure out where people are at and see what solution we need to provide for which group.
When you're going through law school, since you're just so early in your career, obviously. So how do you pick probate? How do you? I guess you're specializing in other areas too, but how do you get going in something like that?
So law is actually a second career for me, and I worked in the high tech industry before going to law school, and have a background in urban planning and real estate. And so
Wow.
it was that interest that led me to law school. And when I was at the Texas Tech School of Law, I was on the estate planning and community property law journal, where I got to do a lot of in-depth education around probate and estate planning, which then led to a career in estate planning and probate.
Wow, interesting. That is cool. Okay. By the way, Derek, you look just like my mentor. By the way, he's a Secret Service agent. I'm not sure if he even has a social media, but his name's John Roberts. Y'all look identical. Y'all could have been brothers. So that's cool. I had a mentor whenever when I showed up to Washington, D.C. I was in the Marine Corps. I did a year in Japan. And then I showed up to the Pentagon, and the guy who was my sergeant, and then he just became a really good lifelong friend. And y'all could be twin brothers. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
I throw that in. So, oh wow, that's cool. Okay, so do you want to touch any what you did in the urban planning at all before the career? Do you want to talk about any kind of that helps you now with clients or sales or?
I think my background in urban planning and real estate, I grew up in the real estate industry. My parents both worked for builders. My stepbrother used to own a mortgage company in Austin. A lot of my friends are real estate agents. So real estate is it's something I'm very familiar with. And so that actually gives me a lot of insight when we're working in probate and we're working with real estate or real property assets. Because I know when people are in the middle of a probate process, everyone has heard of the word probate and nobody knows what it is. And so, what I tell people is probate is the legal process of transferring someone's legacy from them as they pass away to the next generation, whoever the next generation is. And that legal process is fairly meticulous. It is complicated, and it requires an attorney, guidance of an attorney. So I know a lot of people are anxious to deal with it as fast as they can. And a lot of times that process is much slower than they are expecting. And it definitely does not go as fast as they want it to.
Especially in Dallas, right?
Especially in Dallas.
Just to give you a backstory, I helped a guy it was three brothers. One died during the probate process. The other guy was in jail, but got out of jail during the 9 months that we were doing the process. And he was named executor, the one that was in jail, believe it or not. So the other brother was working the file, trying to sell the house. It was on delay because he wouldn't sign while he was in jail. So we had to wait for some reason. And then we found an IRS lien. So this is a whole mess, but it was 18 months that we worked on that one house in Dallas, Texas. So
yeah, and the reality is a lot of times when we're doing probate, there's basically two parts of probate. There's all the stuff we need to do before we get to a probate hearing. And then there's the administration of the estate, or all the things we need to do to actually address and work on the estate. And depending on which one of those paths we're going down, whether it's the easy, the normal, or the hard, is going to determine how many steps are in each one of those sections. And so a lot of people think that, when we do the first part, that's everything that we need to do. And the reality is that's about the halfway point. When we get to the probate hearing, if it is what we call an independent administration, or the executor or the administrator gets to go off and do whatever they need to do without court supervision, that hearing to appoint that person is that halfway.
And that's where I see, from my viewpoint, when I get in touch with somebody or someone calls me to do a bid on a house, it's 50-50 normally, where they say they haven't heard from their attorney or they don't understand what's going on. How do you guys prevent that in a way? How do you guys combat that, I guess?
Yeah. So, one, most of my clients have never been a part of a probate process, which is what we expect. If you have been a part of a probate process, I have follow-up questions, usually as the attorney. But, one of the things that we do is we have a consultation, and that consultation is getting to understand what's important to the potential client. That is different than, once we're retained, we actually have a legal strategy session with the client, and we kind of walk through the process. I know one of the things that's really difficult is I could walk you through the whole process, but it's complicated, it's convoluted, and there's a lot of steps that we need to do, and you will forget them all. So we will give you a part of the process, because we don't want to overwhelm people with information. But then we try and do a monthly case update so that people generally know where we are. Now, if somebody wants a more regular update than that, we will absolutely accommodate that. We just let everybody know that usually when we're providing these case updates, that's part of our fees. Everyone gets paid for the work that they do. We're happy to communicate more frequently. That just tends to cost a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's taking your time out. Make sure that you're touching base with them. If it's weekly, it's hard. It's hard yeah.
Yeah. And the reality is
There's no changes.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, there's no changes in the case from one week to the next. Courts tend to operate, especially in Dallas County, in a month increment. So, like, when we're having hearings, it's depending on how long the court is booked out. Sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's 8 weeks. I know when Dallas County when the probate courts were moving out of the Renaissance Tower and back into the George Allen Courthouse, it was 4 months before we could get a hearing. I mean, a lot of that had to do with just the transition. So it really depends on where the court is and how much time how far they're booked.
When was that time frame that they were moving?
They moved, I think, right around this time last year.
Okay. Yeah, that explains it. Yeah, because they got a reputation for being a little bit longer than Tarrant County or Collin County, or just the major, even Denton. It seems like they're all around 4 or 5 months.
And a lot of that has to deal with just the number of people in Dallas County. Dallas County has 3 probate courts, Collin County has 1, and Tarrant County has 2 probate courts. And usually you can get through the Tarrant County courts or the Collin County courts rather quickly. In other counties that do not have what we call statutory probate courts, or probate courts that are established by the Texas legislature, then you're going to be in a county court at law usually. So those are usually pretty quick, but those counties, I think of it like Johnson County or Ellis County, Kaufman County, those courts are hearing a whole variety of topics, not just probate.
Yeah. So they're doing the criminal, they're doing family.
It depends. Yeah, it just depends on how many courts they have and who's doing what and how they've divided it up. But Dallas County, Denton County, basically the 4 core counties of the Metroplex all have their own probate courts that do nothing but hear probate.
Okay, interesting. That's the first time I kind of dug into that. Yeah, I thought I read a while back, about a year ago, that some probate cases get moved to a bigger county. Is that correct? If there was a contested case, is that true?
Not necessarily. What it depends on, because cases can only be heard in certain locations based on either where the assets are or where the decedent lived, the person who passed away, where they lived. And so we don't just get to randomly pick a county because there's a contested matter. Usually those contests are going to be heard in the county where the decedent.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could just pay a larger fee and go to Tarrant County with your Dallas County probate. That'd be a little bit easier. Are you seeing the flexibility opening up, or do you do Zoom hearings in Dallas, or is it moving towards that direction ever since COVID?
Dallas County continues to do Zoom hearings. The other counties, it depends on the judge. A lot of my Tarrant County cases tend to be in person. I have one Travis County case in Austin right now, and they will only do in person. So it just depends on the county and what they're going to do. But Dallas County is embracing Microsoft Teams and Zoom style hearings, those virtual hearings.
Very good. Wow. Describe your team for me a little bit. So you said you have 14 people. Is that attorneys or is it staff or is it?
Both. So
Okay.
the way we like to help our clients manage how much money we cost is, when you're asking for people to work on your case, we try and have attorneys only work on things that attorneys have to do. So we can have paralegals who cost less, draft some different things. We can have case managers who are also kind of like legal assistants. They will follow up and do client communications. And then the attorneys are going to be the ones who are reviewing the documents that have been drafted, attending the court hearings, and just kind of shepherding the case. But we want to try and be as respectful and judicious with everyone's money. And so we try and have the people that need to do tasks, do those tasks and those tasks.
Very nice. Okay. And then are you actually going to Austin yourself to do that Travis one?
So I have a dear friend who is a probate attorney in Austin, and she's going to cover that hearing. We're doing all the work from here, and then she's
Nice.
going to go. Otherwise, we would have had to have gone to Austin.
Okay. That's good. So are you going to try to cover all the major cities in Texas for your, I almost said brokers, but law firm. So,
We are focused on North Texas. Every once in a while, we do have a case that takes us out of the Metroplex. I know usually we try not to go too far because, those judges in those counties like attorneys that they know and trust. And sometimes, especially in East Texas, you say you're a Dallas attorney and that has a reputation. And so we want to make sure our clients are getting the best services that they can and don't want the reputation of Dallas to impact them outside of the Metroplex.
yeah. So my first class I took I was able to join as a realtor, I was able to join the Tarrant County Bar Association, and I'm a sponsor too. But my first class I ever took was with Miss Burns before she was a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like every time I see her, she gave me a hug last time I saw her. So it's incredible. It's incredible to know the people in the world of probate. And like you said, when you have that, one of the things she said in the last class we took was the people usually don't have that role to be a fiduciary or executor in someone's life. So they don't mean to make mistakes or omissions, but it happens. And just what you're saying, if you have a familiar attorney that that you 9 out of 10 times you're going to file what's needs to be filed correctly, usually helps out.
Yeah. And, being a fiduciary is really important. And I think that a lot of people don't give it enough gravity or enough attention. And there's real liability for people if they screw up being a fiduciary. And so when someone asks you, will you be my executor? Can I name you in my will? You have to be ready to be working with an attorney for an extended period of time. And you have to make sure that you're doing everything the right way. So it is not a decision to be taken lightly. And I also talk to my clients about who might be the best person to be the executor or the backup executor, because so often a lot of people will name their significant other their spouse. And the reality is not that that's a bad choice. It's oftentimes the best choice. But another consideration is those are usually the people that are grieving the most when they've lost their loved one, that they've lost you. And so maybe there is an alternate person that can work with them or instead of them to help kind of ease that burden.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we don't really, I told you I market to the PRs to earn real estate business. I usually leave the spouses alone. I usually try not to, it's just in my history or my experience, they don't really tend to sell the real estate. They just transfer the name. But it's usually very difficult to deal with. They're not, yeah, like you're saying, but, on a guidance scale, because we've done so many cases, or not cases, but houses in probate, I could answer questions for them, but usually I stay away from it. Yeah. So, yeah, being an executor, huh? Who do you normally recommend then? Is it somebody, so the ideal person in someone's family?
The ideal person for someone to pick as an executor is the person that you trust. And so if you don't have a lot of family nearby, maybe it is your neighbor that you have known for 20 years. Maybe it's your best friend. Maybe it's someone you go to church with. Maybe it is somebody that you volunteer with in an organization. It does not have to be a family member, but it definitely needs to be someone you trust. And I also, when I'm doing estate planning, if you're picking somebody that's, even if you are picking a family member, I think it's a really good idea to call the family in and have a family meeting that usually I will shepherd and say, hey, we just kind of want to walk you through what's in place and what the expectations are and what's going to happen whenever this day happens. And again, we don't need to have those family meetings, right before someone passes away. I like to do them when we're doing estate planning. And so for anyone who's just bought a home, you should have your estate plan in place. And that's, we can do all of that, all those family meetings. And again, we give those, all the documents, all the originals of your documents. We give those to the person who signed them, who executed them. And then they have all the originals to hand out, make copies, give to family members so that they have a copy or whatever they need to do. One of the really important things on the probate side is you must have the original will. So if you don't have the original will, Texas law presumes that you revoked it. And then we have to offer testimony that in fact you did not. And it's really difficult if we don't have the original to prove that, or to tell the court that you need to,
It's okay.
that you need to, that you haven't revoked it. So it's really, really important that you know where the original will is and that other people know where the original will is. Now, if you pass away because your house burns down, it's really easy for me to tell a judge they didn't revoke it. It literally burned down with the house. But, I have one case right now where a person was married to the gentleman who passed away and the family doesn't like her. And so they think that she destroyed the will, even though the whole family was aware that they were all updating their estate plans. And we found a new will. It was just never signed, or we don't know where the signed copy is. So then we get into questions in court and litigation about whether or not we should be using a previous will or whether or not we have to proceed if there's no will at all. If you don't sign a will, but we find a newer version, we don't get to use that. We have to go through extra steps. We have to notify everyone who would inherit, assuming there was no will. And I think that's another really important point is if you do not have a will, the state of Texas has already defined what happens to your estate. And so when you create a will, you are overriding the Texas legislature. So most people, if they say, oh, my spouse gets everything automatically. And another estate planning attorney and I love to tell people you need to remove the word automatically from your vocabulary as it relates to anything probate, because nothing is automatic.
Interesting. Yeah, the words in the will are important. I've heard that before. Yeah. So you have an ideal situation in Dallas. How long are you have the will, you have everything laid out, disinherited and inherited, you have real estate involved, cars and collections. What's the advice when they're waiting that period of time for notifying the collectors or the family?
The first question I usually get is we get a phone call from a family member that says, my family member has passed away, and the amount of time that's passed varies. I had somebody call us as like, they passed away yesterday. And my response is, the most important thing you can do right now is to make whatever arrangements you need to, get through a funeral or a memorial, and then call us back. Because the reality is we're not going to be able to do too many things without a death certificate. And that usually takes a couple weeks. So some people, though, want to meet with an attorney while all the siblings are in town or there's relatives that have come in for that, and absolutely go in, schedule the consultation, meet with the attorney, the legal team, so that everyone's on the same page. Because oftentimes that's where we get into challenges. We're talking about communication earlier. The challenges end up being when we have multiple siblings and some people are getting the information because they're the client and that information's not being relayed to the other siblings. And so we have kind of this lack of information getting to all the parties that need it. And so sometimes when we have that situation, we'll ask for permission to provide those case updates to all the siblings or everybody that's going to be affected.
Yeah.
So that everyone's kind of on board with where we are.
That's interesting because there's some people that, family members don't communicate. And that's where I think I see the most of the problems happen, where they don't want to share the will just yet. Or someone is disinherited that's not disclosed right away because they don't want to. That must be a tough phone call. Are you inbounding that call yourself or another team member? That when they obviously have an office phone, so they're going to call the office, and you're not jumping on every call. I get that, but
Yeah, so we have an intake specialist that will kind of talk to everybody, kind of find out what's going on in their situation, find out details about their case or potential case, and talk about what is the driving factor for them calling today. Because oftentimes that's really important, understanding what people's motivations are, what they think that their motivations are. And then we'll schedule a consultation. They'll get to meet with our client specialist, who will go ahead and talk about our process and what they should expect at DebnamRust. I, as one of the attorneys, will come in, talk a little bit about the case and potential legal strategy, and specifically tell them that we're going to schedule a more in-depth legal strategy meeting to kind of talk about what's next after we're retained.
nice. So I've heard in the past, going back a little bit, that attorneys used to keep the records, and you recommended that they actually keep them now, huh? The
Absolutely.
originals.
Part of the reason for that is, oftentimes attorneys will retire, and then all of a sudden we're sitting with so many wills, and then they end up getting mailed to the clients anyway. So we tell everybody, you're going to keep it from the beginning. Now, if you lose it, if it gets destroyed, you need to change it, let us know. We will re-execute another copy, because we keep electronic copies of everything, both the drafts that we do as well as the fully executed documents. So we will go ahead and we'll have those ready to go if for whatever reason we need to sign a new one, so that the client always has the original. I go out into the community and I give a lot of information sessions about estate planning, because again, that's another term people I think have heard and don't necessarily know what it means. And I think depending from law firm to law firm, what we talk about when we're thinking about estate planning changes from person to person or law firm to law firm. And so I include typically 7 or 8 documents in our estate planning package, and somebody else may include a different number of documents. They may only include 4 or 5. And so we want to make sure that we're clear about what everybody should be thinking about from an estate planning perspective. And again, what's important is going to be different depending upon some significant tax law implication. So if the value of your estate is over around 13 and a half, $14 million, the estate planning strategy we're going to put in place is very, very different than if we're under $13.5 million threshold. And that tax threshold is about estate taxes and what people will pay and or not pay. And so when we're talking about estate planning, I always like to find out what people's goals are. And a lot of people, the number one myth that I hear about estate planning is, I don't have anything, so I don't need to have an estate plan.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'm here to tell you that most estate planning documents are about you prior to you passing away. Your powers of attorney, your statutory durable power of attorney, your medical power of attorney, HIPAA releases, declaration of guardians, so many different things that are about you. And only 2 documents are about situations after you pass away, specifically a will and an appointment for an agent for disposition of remains, or the person that gets to deal with your body and your remains and what restrictions are on them. So if you want to be cremated, you can specify that you are only to be cremated, and then there's no choice for that person but to do that. It's also a good place to put some funeral arrangements, or if you want to be buried in a specific cemetery, or you want to have a memorial or some sort of service at a certain church. Those are all places we can put those things.
Interesting. Wow. Very detailed. Yeah. Very detailed. Any other thoughts for preparation wise?
I think the other thing that's really important that I talk to people about when I'm doing estate planning is, a lot of my recommendations to people is, how do we avoid probate in the first place? Probate is this process, like we talked about, that can get drug out for an extended period of time, court oversight. A lot of times I'll talk to people about living revocable trusts. And again, a lot of people say, oh, I don't have anything for a trust. And I'm like, well, let's talk about what some of the goals are, what some of the benefits are of a trust. And honestly, what I talk to people about is, when I do a retainer for a probate with a will, right now it's around $8,000 to $10,000, depending on what we've got. If you don't have a will, it's $10,000 to $15,000. I will draft a revocable living trust on a flat fee for $2,500. All right. So there's, obviously it's not completely, there's a little bit of cost shifting and there's a little bit of maintenance that goes into managing a trust, but it's significantly less expensive. And I think most importantly, it's much easier on your loved ones when they're grieving the loss of you. And there are some elements of privacy that also go along with living revocable trusts. You start putting real estate in trusts and we start filing deeds in the name of the trust. Yeah. As long as your name is not in the title, no one can pull you up on DCAD and figure out where you live.
Yeah, it's true. Excuse my ignorance on this question. The revocable trust that's changeable, right? Or not changeable?
Okay. Revocable means you can change it at any point up until you pass away. Irrevocable means if you want to change anything in that document, it is incredibly difficult. And in fact, everyone who has an interest in that trust now or in the future has to agree to that change. So as you can imagine, if you want to change your trust so that you want to remove people in an irrevocable situation, they have to agree to be removed. They're not going to do that. And so in a revocable trust, you get to change it. Now there are benefits, pros and cons to both, depending again on what you're trying to do. So talk to an attorney, so they can find out what your goals are and what the best mechanism to accomplish those goals is.
Interesting. Yeah. I definitely need to do that myself. I've been delaying that for a while. I'm getting into that period of life where I'm starting to get a little leverage myself. So it's nice.
And when families are trying to sell a house after the person passes away, if that house is already in the trust, it is a matter of days that we can go ahead and enter into a contract for sale, because it's all about who has the legal authority to enter into that contract. And so when someone passes away and we have a will, we have to go through that process so the judge can appoint an executor or appoint someone to have legal authority to enter into that contract. If there's already a trust and the trust designates who the legal authority is, the successor trustee, then I'm not going to say it's automatic, but it's really fast.
A lot easier, yeah.
A lot easier and much less huge cost savings.
How do you warn your clients? It seemed it wasn't so popular when I've always marketed to people that were in the process of probate, I guess you want to call it. But nowadays it seems to be more popular for everybody calling these people when they're filed their application. Is there a conversation that you have with the family that you're going to get lots of people calling you and interest in the assets?
Yeah. When I was doing some work for a family member and their parents passed away. And I said, hey, by the way, as soon as we file this application, you're about to get inundated with phone calls. And as eventually they just stop answering the phone. If they don't recognize the number, they don't answer the phone. I think that if people are trying to get involved in real estate transactions that are in probate, I think it's a better idea to build relationships with probate attorneys, because at the end of the day, we are making recommendations on if there's a real estate agent, if they need a recommendation for a real estate agent, then we'll make that recommendation. If they're needing a recommendation for an estate sale company, then we're making those recommendations. And so I think building those connections with entities that would be involved in the process, as opposed to going to the people directly, is probably going to be the most effective long-term solution.
Yep. Incredible. I just met a guy that rented tables. Very nice guy. He works for a couple of estate sale companies and he rents tables to them. Incredible. All the different little jobs that people have come up with. And he's busy. He said he owns over 200 sets of tables. And he's constantly just dropping off tables.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So all
The
little
other
jobs you got.
entities that might be a good source are going to be trust companies for banks.
Mm.
So Frost and Chase and Wells Fargo and everybody has a trust department, and those are going to usually be larger estates or larger trusts, and so they may need real estate agents as well.
So fun question. Tonight's the Powerball. So when someone wins the Powerball, what's your advice on that?
Before you cash in that ticket, talk to a CPA, a financial planner, and an attorney. And that's true on estate planning just in general. We all have our own lanes. I always recommend, again, that people work with all three of us. Financial planners have a job to do that's different from CPAs, that's different from attorneys. I like to tell people I play the what if game for a living, and I can tell you all the different paths that we can go, and there's pros and cons to each. I can't always tell you all of the tax consequences. And so that's where CPA is going to step in and make sure that you understand whatever, if there are any tax consequences, and if there are, that your goals outweigh the consequences. I mean, that we've dealt with them inside whatever document, but they're usually, CPAs are typically looking backwards. Financial planners are usually looking forwards. And so always having that guidance looking forward is a great idea as well.
With your background with the other career you had, the tech and the real estate, do you attract more business from that world? Do people still know you from that career before you are in law? Does that attract more business that way?
Well, most of my previous career was in Austin. And so when we started the law firm, we had offices in Austin and Dallas, but we've focused primarily on the Metroplex. And so every once in a while, I'll get a referral from somebody in Austin,
Nice.
or there's an issue here in Dallas that we know
Yeah.
people about. But yeah, all of those connections matter.
Yeah. I haven't met a lot of people that have a connection to real estate on attorney base. Usually my experience with attorneys so far is from sponsoring events, they only want to focus on one little area, but they get good at that. That's nothing wrong with that. But it seems like you're doing estate planning, you're doing the actual probate filing, and very few do the contested files. So
yeah, we are one of I would say a handful of law firms that will take a contested case.
interesting.
And part of that is litigation is expensive. And usually when families start getting into litigation, the fees tend to outpace a lot of the benefit. And so one of the things I really try and work with clients on is presenting a business case. Saying, okay, if we do this, here's the fees. This is the amount of money that's at play. Does this make sense? And sometimes it's not about the business case, it's about the emotional case for them. And so we want to make sure that we are, again, why people are coming to talk to attorneys is really important. And I think attorneys, if we do a really good job of asking the why questions, then I think that's one way we can really make sure that we're doing everything right by our clients.
I mentioned before, we don't normally think about talking to attorneys in life until
Well, and a lot
something
of people,
goes
it's
wrong.
intimidating to talk to attorneys. And so,
Yeah.
I am an adjunct professor of Texas Tech School of Law, where I teach advanced constitutional law.
Interesting.
And I am not here as a representative of Texas Tech. But, one of the things that's really important is being able to take these legal concepts and break them down in a way that anybody can understand them. Because if you've never been to law school and you're trying to explain to somebody who doesn't have any experience with probate what it is, it's really easy to get in the weeds of the law and lose people.
Right. I actually coach a bunch of realtors around the nation, 70, and I have to do the same. I have to tell them not to let the people do their jobs. And when they're ready to sell the real estate, if you build a relationship or the reputation, they're coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, we do about 50 sales a year that are tied to probate, and that was a goal of mine. Now I'm gonna try to push it even more, but we're closing one today or tomorrow for three sisters. They've held on to the house since 2012. There were some difficulties with the emotions there, and we finally got to the finish line where we got everybody to sign. So it's, you're right, that emotional toll. It's been 13 years since their father passed, and they just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah, it's hard.
No will in place at all. So thank you. Everything you've mentioned, this is great. How do people find you on the internet? How do they get a hold of you? What's some resources they could research, I guess?
Yeah, so the law firm is DebnamRust, and we're at DebnamRust.com, and that's DEBNAM rust.com and or 775-0628. And when they call, they can just ask to speak to our intake specialist, and they can talk share all of the pieces about their case, and we can get them taken care of.
That's awesome, Derek. That's awesome. So what do you love about law? What's a really fun story? Just to end that real quick, what makes you excited about this? For me, I love real estate. I found it by accident, I guess. I was a police officer, Marine, so I wanted to be hard charging. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, actually,
Okay.
early in my days. But now I'm selling houses.
You know, when I got into law by accident, I really wanted to get into real estate and urban planning. And when I started looking around in Texas for a job related to urban planning, that doesn't really exist much unless you work for a municipality. And that really wasn't where I wanted to go. And I didn't have an architecture degree, so I couldn't go work for developers. And so I ended up going to law because in my undergraduate program, there was a lot of law, and so I kind of fell into law. And one of the things I love the most about the law is it really is the keys to the kingdom. And you get to understand why we do all of the weird things that we do. Or, if when the governor does something, what's the authority for him to do that? And does that have an impact on you? And if the mayor says something, does that matter? Or why can the police not do this or that? Or if you see the police doing something, is that legal? You really do just get insight into the fabric of our society. And that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You see these civil law cases and all these, mistakes that police officers make or don't make. And people just don't understand the safety factor there, especially with being in law. You guys have a lot of rules and a lot of reasons you could interpret it a way that you have to interpret it to the public in a way. And yeah.
And I think a lot of people think the law is black and white, and it's exactly the opposite. The law is shades of gray. So, and that's one of the things they teach you in our very first semester of law school is the law is not black and white. Very rarely is it black and white. And that's really difficult because our society operates in black and white. It's either this way or that way, or it's right or it's wrong. 9 times out of 10 in the legal side of it, that's not the case. It's a lot of questions about equity or equality, or what's the right thing to do under the law, or what's in the best interest of children, or whatever the standard may be. Yeah, so our law firm is one of the few law firms in Texas that is knowledgeable about issues facing the LGBTQ plus community. And so a lot of my work, I'm appointed by, so of all the other things that I do, I am appointed by Dallas County to represent kids and parents in CPS cases. And some of the work that I have done around CPS work has been educating both caseworkers, judges, and other attorneys about issues they might face if they come across a child who identifies as transgender, and what are some appropriate, age-appropriate recommendations that the court might need to consider in those types of situations.
Interesting. I mean, that's amazing, your background, how you got into this, and you never know what you don't know until you learn about it or learn the person,
It's funny. That's one of our sayings in our office. We have a motto. It's you don't know what you don't know until you know it.